You were quoted recently as saying that the dreaded N-word, code for nationalization or threats of nationalization in the wake of the ruling party's elective conference in December is what is driving this negative sentiment, because people don't know about policy certainty. But I wanted to put to you, Mr. Sibiya, that the ANC held its policy conference in July, and it was clear that wholesale nationalization was off the table. Why are you not satisfied with that answer?
Well, we know that the policy conference comes with the draft resolutions which will be discussed in the national conference. At the national conference, the delegates are free to raise from the floor the issues, and they discuss them and debate them as appropriate. And the information which you are receiving is there are still some noises and some overtures of some people wanting to raise those from the floor. And for us then, from our perspective, we are saying really it would be extremely unfortunate. There are a number of other issues which are causing the mining industry not to perform well, but the policy uncertainty is one of the biggest.
Now, when I spoke with Mr. Karema, the Secretary of the African National Congress, last about exactly these concerns, he assured me that in the engagements between the ruling party and yourselves as a chamber, these issues have indeed been ironed out. What exactly are the pertinent points that makes your members, cautious and concerned about the potential direction of policy around mining?
Let's deal just with nationalization, and then we deal with other issues very briefly. One, in terms of nationalization, it was raised by the ANC Youth League. And when one looks at the ANC Youth League and the mother body at the moment are really at juxtaposition. And therefore, the probability is high the Youth League is going to raise it. And so that's why we are concerned. But beyond that, there is an electricity problem in this country. In terms of energy, we have a problem with the reliability of supply, but also the costing thereof. And with our mines and the ore body being deeper and really being more scarce and thin, therefore we need to spend more electricity to reach that ore body, and therefore it becomes a problem. The railway infrastructure still does not serve the mining industry as best as it could. Those are some of the issues which cause us to be apprehensive. Now with the Marikana and the post-Marikana, the wage settlements were high relative to productivity. In absolute terms, there is nothing wrong with the settlements as they have done, but relative to lower productivity, there are problematic areas. And then with the subdued, as it were, commodity prices, it really makes the mining houses and the mines not profitable.
Now, of course, the Chamber of Mines have been involved in a series of discussions with all the role players, particularly the big unions across the different sectors in mining. And I saw a report earlier quoting Mr. Frans Paleni from the National Union of Mine Workers saying that you haven't tabled, employers haven't tabled the issue of productivity tied to wage increases. Is this likely to happen, and is this likely to happen anytime soon?
I think the productivity issue is the hardy annual, and Mr. Paleni may really nitpick and say, in this round of the discussions which took place 4 months ago, it has not been tabled. And yes, it has not been tabled probably very specifically, but the productivity issue, we have been grappling with those for a long time. For us, in terms of platinum in particular, we're understanding that 59% of the mines are either at break-even or loss-making, and therefore the debate and the discussion about productivity is an ongoing issue. But coming next year, it is going to be the center stage.
But is it also not concerning to you as a chamber that the kind of bonuses that mine owners, in particular platinum, against the backdrop of losses that they've been paying themselves, is that also not a concern that the way in which these mines are managed from a management perspective is perhaps not the best model possible? You've been engaged in discussions with President Jacob Zuma. There's been a discussion around addressing lower-end workers and potentially a pay freeze at the top. Where are we in terms of what mine management is bringing to the party to try and address some of the inequalities just in terms of the pay structure that exists within mining, and in particular in platinum?
Well, those issues are being handled at a company level, and therefore for us as a chamber, we are not involved. Do we acknowledge that the gap between the wealthiest and the lowest pay is wide? Yes, it is. But when one looks at the Gini coefficient, it is not as affected by the chief executive and the senior executives than it is by the entrepreneurs. And when one looks at the pay freeze, the entrepreneurs' issues are not dealt with because nobody has said, you're not going to take dividends. Dividends are going to be directed to the poorest. And therefore, there is a bit of disingenuousness of some of the entrepreneurs who are involved in that discussion because they are looking at it and say salary is no longer the core source of revenue for them. Their source of revenue is wealth generation and dividends. And so for us, we're looking at it, let's grapple with that issue, but let's deal with it within the context of productivity.
In terms of the platinum sector, there has been a series of discussions to try and formulate a forum where you can have some sort of collective bargaining because that's not present. We know that a series of facilitators have been engaged. Can you just give us a progress report? Last time I spoke with Mr. Mabena, who's the manager for stakeholder relations at the chamber and the unions, they were saying we're talking about a 2-month period. Where are we? Are we any closer to having an agreed to bargaining chamber that will regulate and manage negotiations around wages in the sector?
I think there are broadly 3 stakeholder groups in that regard. One is the employers, and the employers are generally saying we are agreeable in having a centralized form of bargaining. And then we have the unions, but the unions are split into 2. We have the NUM and AMCU.
I understand AMCU left the negotiations at some point. Can you confirm whether they're still participating?
They are not participating as we speak, and that's what is delaying the process, because for us we were to say, one, let there be an acceptance between NUM and AMCU that there is going to be peaceful coexistence of the 2 of them, and then we're going to engage with them. And then they left the facilitated process. We're looking at the process being concluded by the end of this week, but I think because of AMCU's absence, it's going to drag probably by another week or 2, hopefully.